What's going on, guys? Jason Frausto for TennisUnleashed.net. Today we're taking a close look at Carlos Alcaraz's forehand technique, and we're going to compare it to Rafael Nadal's. If you want to see what the differences and their forehand technique are, stay tuned because it's coming up next.
Chaos is coming. Chaos is coming.
All right, guys, so let's jump into the technique analysis now. I've got Rafa on the left side here and Alcaraz on the right side, but just before we do, make sure you visit 12KGP Tennis's YouTube channel. That's where all this footage is coming from, so check out his channel. Great stuff over there. Let's break it down now and look at the differences in the technique. So again, Rafa on the left, Alcaraz on the right. The first thing I want to notice is not actually a difference, but it's a similarity, guys, and that's in the ready position here as they're going to hit the stroke, how wide both players have their feet here, their base, and then how they've dropped their hips, right? They're loading their bodies, and they're getting ready to load and then uncoil into the shot. They're using the ground to generate power. Yes, you can just use your arm if you really want to, but the kinetic chain is better used when you're using the ground force as part of that chain. So we want to use the ground to generate pace, and both guys do that really, really well. In this position, another similarity, the elbow, the hitting elbow, is slightly away from the body for both players. Just a little bit of a gap right there to give them a little breathing room. But then going forward here, guys, frame by frame, we're going to start to notice the differences. And the first thing that really sticks out with Alcaraz especially is the racket head here, and the racket is pointed almost straight forward towards his opponent as he's going to hit his forehand. Compare that to Nadal over here, where his racket is more vertical and then leaning towards him like this. It's not pointed straight at the opponent. And if we go back and look at old Nadal footage from 2013 to probably 2016, he actually used to point the racket straight forward like what we see with Alcaraz, but he abandoned that technique because it was taking him too long to get through the forehand stroke, and guys were easily damaging him on his forehand side because, again, it was taking him too long to get through that windup. So he shortened it and has now taken his elbow position and kept the elbow more down to eliminate that tilt. If you want to tilt, all you simply have to do is what Alcaraz is doing right here, and that's raise your elbow up. We can see it rises a little bit more. The more you raise your elbow up like this, the more the racket will tilt forward. But that also usually means the longer it takes to get through the swing. So see, Rafa still has that elbow down, right? He's trying to avoid the tilt. Alcaraz, super fast with his hands. He can have that tilt in the stroke, and it doesn't affect him very often. Another thing that we can notice, here's a similarity that can help you at home, is looking at the non-hitting hand or the offhand, right? And looking at the position of it and where they're holding the racket. A lot of players now that have two-handed backhands tend to take the offhand and hold it very low on the throat of the racket because it's easier to make your grip changes between your forehand and your two-handed backhand. So we see with both players, the offhand or non-hitting hand is very low on the throat of the racket. Moving forward from there, though, guys, we've got, again, look at the difference in the elbow position between the two players. Rafa keeping his down, Alcaraz elevating up towards the shoulder, which is going to take longer to get through the swing. And then from there, let's look at the next difference that we'll see technique-wise, and that's with Rafa taking his non-hitting arm and extending it straight out to his side, which is pretty standard technique-wise. Alcaraz doesn't quite achieve that position. His arm is a little bit more bent in the shape of a V than it is fully extended away from his body. I don't have a problem with what Alcaraz is doing in any capacity as long as he doesn't have a problem with getting jammed by the ball. Some people that don't fully extend the non-hitting arm have issues with getting jammed by the ball, but he does not have that problem on his swing. Let's move forward from there and see if we see any other differences between the swings. One thing we do notice, right, and this isn't a swing difference, but it's really the footwork and stance. Nadal is hitting from a semi-open stance where the right foot is in front of the left foot, while Alcaraz is actually stepping in and hitting a neutral stance. A neutral stance is when your left foot is directly in front of your right foot and you're stepping forward inside the court, and that's exactly what he's doing. And you might say, Jason, well, why are the stances so different between the two players? The stance for Alcaraz is different because Alcaraz is going to be hitting this forehand and then immediately following it into the net as an approach shot. Okay, so he's going to come in behind it. Nadal on this particular shot is hitting from the semi-open stance, and I believe he's going to stay back on this shot. He's not going to move forward. Otherwise, in this position, guys, they both look pretty similar. And one thing that's unique about both of these players is they both hit a completely straight arm forehand. So look at right here. Nadal starts in this 90-degree bend angle with the hand and hitting hand from the shoulder here, right? Alcaraz has a bend in his arm at this point. But as we go forward, Nadal straightens out the hitting arm, and Alcaraz actually does the exact same thing. And then when they straighten out that arm, and Alcaraz is almost completely straight there, Rafa definitely is on this side of the court, but the head of the racket will be off to the left when they achieve this position, and for Alcaraz, it's going to be off to his right, okay? So there's racket leg involved in these forehands, which allows for a lot of racket head speed, spin, and power, and both players achieve a very similar position, but let's move forward from there now. And we can see the flip of the racket, right? And this is something I talk about all the time, but I feel like I need to repeat it because this is something that you want to do on your forehand, and that's the elbow position in relation to the tip of your racket. So when you get into this position, the tip of your racket should be lined up with your elbow or even go past the elbow more in this direction. And we can see Alcaraz achieves that as well. The tip of his racket is well behind his elbow. And the bigger this swing is from this position to the actual contact, especially if you have to do it in a very short period of time, the more racket head speed and spin you're going to get on the actual stroke, right? So we want to achieve this position on our forehand to get more power and to have a bigger forehand. And Alcaraz does that on this side, and Nadal also does that over here. Let's step forward and see if we see anything else. From here, both players' contact heights are drastically different, right? That's just because we have different heights of balls. Alcaraz is taking a much lower forehand here. It's just below waist height, while Rafa's taking a ball that's almost up by his shoulders. But one thing you can learn from both these guys, just go back for a little bit here, is that you need to go from this bent position, right? And this is something I preach all the time. And you need to engage and use your legs on your forehand. But go from this bent position here and then really extend off the ground, right, and straighten out your legs leading into the contact to get more power on your forehand. So bend and then extend. And then as we come from here, guys, we can see that Alcaraz's non-hitting hand is just above his shoulder at this point. Both guys have used the non-hitting hand and arm to pull into the body to help rotate them and come through, and Rafa's arm is hidden and his hand is hidden by his body. The last thing that we see here that might be a little bit different, right, is the finish position. So look at Nadal, classic buggy whip, does that all the time. The reverse forehand that he uses time and time again. And Alcaraz here with a little bit more of a shoulder height finish, driving this forehand, with Rafa on this side going for a little bit more of a top spinny and lifty forehand. So the interesting thing for me is that both of these guys, if you just go back for a second again, are hitting a straight arm forehand, right? And that's something we've seen with Federer. We've seen it with Del Potro. We've seen it with Fernando Verdasco, Paradorn Shisha fan. Throwback there for some of you guys that are older tennis fans. But a lot of great players have used straight arm forehands, and Alcaraz continues that tradition with a really good and strong straight arm forehand. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video on Carlos Alcaraz's forehand technique compared to Rafael Nadal's. If you found this video helpful or you feel like you learned something today, make sure you smash that like and subscribe button. It helps this channel grow. I'm Jason Frausto for tennisunleashed.net. I'll see you next time.